the front of, he has multiple scars. He had subdural hematoma when he was 5, and that was...
Did he have a skull fracture at that time?
I don't know. I don't recall.
Denver pediatrician Ray Helfer is co-editor of the book, The Battered Child.
Right out there? Yeah? You feeling any better? Good. Tell me once again now how you hurt your back.
I did.
Daddy did it? What did he do it with? Fan belt. How come?
You didn't do your work.
And do you work? What's your work?
Chip calls.
The largest in battering is among children from birth to 3 years. This older boy happened to be the subject of this team meeting.
What'd you skin it on? Did you fall off the truck? Didn't you? I'm going to get some psychologicals on him because I have the feeling if he is, that we might see some changes over the next several months if we change the environment. Thank you for coming. Okay? You have your shirt back, or?
This group is the Battered Child team at the University of Colorado Medical Center in Denver. The basic working team consists of pediatricians, psychiatrists, and social workers who handle cases of battered children and the parents who have abused them. This is a part of their weekly lunch and working session, during which information is exchanged about a variety of cases and procedures.
Now, it seems to me the father's already gone through the business of having warnings and having had a previous admission, and it hasn't done it. It hasn't done it.
Dr. C. Henry Kempe is chairman of the Department of Pediatrics and co-editor of The Battered Child.
The next one will take it away. Do you think it'll have any effect, or do you think it's really beyond his control?
I think it's beyond his control at the moment. Now, whether we could help him develop some controls, I have no idea. It would depend upon making some contact with him, working with him a little bit, and finding out something about him from his own background of being one of 20 children and being pushed from pillar to post in foster homes or orphan asylums or whatnot. He's not going to feel very confident in the world being good to him. Presumably he's been beating the children for some 15 or 20 years. Now, what happened in his previous marriage, we don't know, except something bad happened. That his wife killed a baby and committed suicide.
I understand these children were in a foster home once before. Some of the children were, at least.
Kay Drews is the coordinator for the Battered Child team.
Children being in a foster home. First cases where we've had the school actively involved and be the ones who have initiated bringing the child in.
Well, we think that at least one child a day in this country is killed because of serious abuse. Probably twice as many. We don't know how many children are seriously brain damaged, but it's a very large group. It's in thousands.
More children are killed in the United States by their parents from physical abuse than the combined causes of illnesses such as rheumatic fever, scarlet fever, whooping cough, chickenpox, measles, tuberculosis, and appendicitis.
NET Journal presents The Battered Child, a study of child abuse based on the book The Battered Child, compiled and edited by Drs. Ray E. Helfer and C. Henry Kempe of the University of Colorado Medical Center. Reporting is Lois Lilly, Pulitzer Prize winner of the Chicago Daily News.
Despite the shock of seeing battered children, despite the unwillingness to believe the facts, it is undeniably true that every year in America, hundreds of children die from sheer physical abuse suffered at the hands of their parents or their legal protectors. The victims can't defend themselves, nor can they tell us how they were injured, simply because most of them are so young they really haven't yet learned to talk. Now, some of them never will. For these, for many others like them, the pure and simple joys of childhood will never be.
Just today we had a child admitted with several fractures of his arms and some healing fractures in his leg and many bruises and cuts. And then Yesterday we had a child that was admitted with severe burns. He had apparently that day been put in hot boiling water. We have quite a number of children that come in that have been put down into hot boiling water in a bathtub. They have burns, well, all the way up to their waists. One was a young child that backed up against an iron, his mother said. A couple of them had pulled hot water over onto themselves, and there was a question that the mother had poured the water on them. One child that I particularly remember just last week was an 18-month-old that had a fractured leg and a fractured arm and several bruises on his head and his face. And he was just beginning to learn how to talk, but he couldn't really tell us what had happened to him. Personally, I feel frustrated and angry. I feel frustrated that we can't do more and that we can't help the children more, and angry that parents can beat their children and just not respond, and that they aren't legally taken care of more. Legally, it's just beginning to actually take effect. We report cases. The doctors are supposed to report cases and have legal immunity, but people are still hesitant to report the cases. They don't want their name involved.
I think probably the most memorable case of child abuse that I've ever seen that I can remember was a small boy, 3 years old, I think he was, who came in with a skull fracture and all the accompanying bruises, and he was in pretty bad shape. He recovered. I suspect he probably went home and the same thing happened to him again. I don't know for sure. But he was a nice child and he was really in a bad condition. Whenever an abuse case or a neglect case comes in, I guess it doesn't matter how many times you see it, you always get upset about it. The children just seem so defenseless. It seems so wrong that this kind of thing should happen to them. The parents who do this to their children have problems too, and they upset me, and I know, especially at first, there were some I think I probably wanted to hate. There are some that I still dislike intensely, but you have to feel sorry for them too, because probably something happened to them that their parents did, perhaps. There's one child that I remember particularly that I think probably everybody on the unit would remember. This was a 3-year-old boy, and oh, he was a lovely child. He was just as sweet as can be. He came in with a broken arm and
Dr. Sweeney, 4747, Dr. Sweeney, 4747.
This sort of thing. He wasn't, terribly injured. He had some broken ribs. Supposedly he had fallen down some stairs. But the staff became very attached to him, felt very protective toward him. It was difficult. His parents didn't come to see him very often, but when they did come, it was very difficult to be nice to them, because we had become so attached to him, I'm sure. He was killed about 3 months later. I'm not sure exactly how.
To find out more about the plight of the battered child and his battering parents, we went to Denver, where the work of the pioneering Kempe-Helfer team is carried on here at the University of Colorado Medical Center under the continuing guidance of Dr. Kempe.
Many of us have been concerned about the presence of very seriously abused children in hospitals over the years. And while everybody's known about the occurrence of this situation, no one really knew the extent of it or the seriousness of it. And for that reason, we sent a letter to some 71 major hospitals around the country to ask how many seriously abused children they had seen in the preceding 1 year. They told us that they had seen 302 such children, and that 33 of these children died, a 10% mortality. Well, there are very few things in pediatrics, child health, that have a 10% mortality. Not only that, but out of these 302 children, 85 suffered permanent brain damage, which of course is a horrendous kind of trouble. In other words, this condition was quite common, and of course more common than disease, say, like leukemia, for example, which everybody reads about a lot.
About 1/2 of the known cases of battered children are discovered in the hospital where they are taken for treatment. Just as many are discovered because someone reported them to the police or to the Department of Welfare. David Wilson is a social worker for Denver Welfare. One of his current cases involves a boy separated from his mother and placed in a foster home after a police report of child abuse and a thorough investigation. Wilson talked individually with the boy, then with the mother, and later with us. The boy is 5 years old and has been in a foster home now for about 2 months. The abuse centered around the parents' way of handling an age-old problem.
So what, as you remember now, what were you doing that made her angry?
Peeing.
The boy's mother is convinced her son was wetting the bed in some attempt to get even with her, although she isn't sure why he needed to do this. But to him, as he explains it, it was simply a matter of not being able to control himself, and when he lost control, he was punished for it.
In fact, I had to throw 2 beds away because he had soaked them real bad. I mean, it's not the cost of the bed or anything, but even so, I mean, he was getting older and he was broke before. I mean, I went along with him for a long time. I went maybe 6 months with just letting him go by his own, but he got worse and worse. And then I just got so terribly upset that I just took drastic measures.
And then what did Mother do?
She set me on beams.
What, sitting down or on your knees, kneeling on the beams? So she put these beams on the floor. And then you, what? You knelt down on those with your knees?
Then she put some paper on them.
And then?
I sit it on my knees.
On your knees. Did this hurt you?
The boy has talked spontaneously with the social worker on several occasions about the measures taken at home to make sure he was in the right place at the right time when his problem occurred.
You remember telling me where you slept? Where was that?
In the shower.
On what?
On a towel.
It seems you were telling me something else that had happened. Do you remember about having been tied in some way?
I peed and my dad hung me some more.
Hung you?
Social worker Wilson told us of the boy's fears in his account of how he had been hung. The boy said he eats Cheerios, lots of them, because, and he looked so hopeful when he said this, if he eats Cheerios, he will be strong and able to defend himself when he goes home again. This was really the only protection he felt he had to physically cope with these adults who were punishing him. He explained that when he was hung, ropes were tied around his waist and under his armpits, suspending him from the ceiling from some rafters. He would hang over a pot that they had placed on a coffee table. The idea was that he would relieve himself in that pot, dependably, reliably, without ever having to wet his bed. Another instance that the mother herself talked about also had to do with the rope and tying.
So I tied him up at the end of the bed, and he would move and fight and everything, and then he got rope burns on him from him twisting and turning and trying to sit and trying to lay and this and that. And I said, David, I said, don't move around so much. I said, because you're going to get burns. I says, and then they're going to, you know, and I don't want the burns on you. And he just kept right on going and going and going. And I had to do housework too. And when I would leave the room, then he would really squirm and everything. And that is what left the rope burns on him. So I kept him in the house so that he wouldn't be seen at the neighbors, because I was trying to heal him up. And he snuck down to the neighbor's house while I was trying to keep him in the house, and so that I could heal up these here wounds that I noticed that he had, and neighbors had seen.
What do you think you could do to help out?
Stop peeing.
Many Americans don't regard this behavior we've heard described as unusual.
Well, there is a large body of the population who feel that a men's home is his castle, and that in fact the freedom to raise one's children any way we care to is an inalienable right. The fact is, most people rightly feel that their home is a free area where they can love and hate and run their lives, decide what they'll read and what televisions they will watch, and that they very much resent interference of any kind. And this is rightfully so, because it's the ultimate in democratic life, that you have an area of considerable freedom, which says if I don't hurt anybody else, I'm my own master.
In cases of child battering, our attention is naturally directed toward the apparent victims, the children. It is the children who draw our attention and our concern. Their hurts are visible and often the most obvious aspect of a battering situation. But from all the research, from all the combined experience of the members of the Battered Child team, one fact emerges again and again in case after case. In each case, there are two victims, the child who is beaten and the parent who does the beating. The team's experience has led them to conclude that no matter how badly injured or beaten the child may be, the parent is equally in need of medical help.
Well, we think that the battered child syndrome is a real disease in the sense that when something that seriously goes wrong in the relationship between parents and child, even though the episode is one that lasts only a few seconds, that moment is one in which the child is not viewed as my child, but rather as something quite different, some hostile, dangerous element that must be in some way subdued, forced, aggressed against, even though it may last only a few seconds in its specific form. This particular expression of child raising is so extreme and so abnormal that it must be viewed as a disease.
If a mother and child have been separated because of a child abuse investigation, the child recuperates in a foster home and grows and thrives, while the mother undergoes the slow, painful process of psychotherapy. Every so often, the two are reunited briefly. Kay Drews brings the mother and her little son together for a visit.
Look who I've got. Here's Mommy. Come on, Mama.
What are you doing, huh? Where you been going, huh?
What? I got it. Oops, dropped your toe.
This child was brought to the hospital when he was 4 weeks old with a broken leg and bruises on his head and body. Assailant or assailants unknown.
Is he getting big?
Yeah.
You can take his hat off if you want. Mama, can I have that? Sure. How old is he now?
He's a year and 5 months.
5 or 6 months. I can't keep track.
Just take your sweater off, please. Let's see, it's been, what, about a month since you saw him, or?
About a month. I get to see him usually once a month, and that's it.
That's all.
And it gets to me after a while. And every time I see him, I emotionally upset him, and then it emotionally upsets me. Take the other one.
Hey, little towhead. Mama loves you, you know that, don't you?
Whoa! Mama catch you on the fly. Now, where do you think you're going? You went down? You went down?
He looks kind of happy where he is. Does he generally recognize him?
No. Last month, he didn't recognize me at all.
Yeah, well, I've been in on some of the visits.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of them. I just said I haven't been able to be available for all of them.
Yeah. No, as soon as this is over, he gets to go out and see his grandma. She gets to see him.
How many times have you seen him in the past year?
About 5 times, and that's about it. Because of transportation problems and the winter and the weather and everything. Sometimes, you know, whenever I see him, it upsets me so greatly that I have to go back to my psychiatrist and get calmed down again. People could understand why parents get upset when they take children and why they know what they feel, you know. But they don't.
Do you think it's harder now that you're seeing him running?
Not now. It's just separating from leaving him again. And then I leave him, I'll start I don't know. When's it that way? There? Okay. Oops, he dropped his toy again. Gracious sake. You're gonna be such a big boy. What are you doing, huh? Don't you want to go back and see Mama? Don't you want to go back and see Mama now? Huh?
Oh, here's the little one.
How do you feel when he doesn't react to you?
Hurt. Like all mothers. You know, if a child doesn't react to its own mother, then you know something's haywire somewhere. It doesn't help the mother much either.
Do you still have the sensation that this is your baby?
My baby? He better be my baby. I gave birth to him. Hey, baby. Now, where do you think you're going? You don't want to fall off on the floor. You want to hurt your head, do you? You want to bang your head against that? It's a little solid, you know. What's the matter? He reminds me of his father in too many ways.
He does? How's that?
His facial expressions and features.
You don't like that?
I don't like that. Don't like his father, period.
He does look a lot like his daddy.
He looks more like his daddy than he does his mom.
I think that brings some kind of bad feelings.
Well, it brings back bad memories. And the psychiatrist says that doesn't help my emotional status as it is. There's your hat and sweater.
Is that one thing that made you think about, you know, what you're going to do with it?
Yeah.
Your final decision?
Yeah. Mom says if it all comes down to it, you know, and if he brings back too many bad memories on me, then it's better to sign him away than keep him. And I think it'll be better for him and for me both, because that way I'll have the rights to visit him as my own brother and not as my son.
You want your parents to adopt him?
Uh-huh. Well, at least I know he's going to have a good home, and he's going to be spoiled. That's why my mom wants him. And I think that it would be best for the both of us, because in this way I know he'd get back faster than what he has. Not try and drop it on the floor.
Fall backward here.
Oh, he's pretty stable. He can, while he's walking. That's what got me into a lot of trouble, too.
What's that?
3 days old, he was turning over from his back to his tummy.
And what happened?
He'd roll into the crib rail. That's where he got most of his black and blue marks on his head.
That's when he was 3 days old?
Yeah, when he was 3 days old. Okay, Mom, put him on his back, but she cannot have him.
Well, listen, why don't I go ahead and take him out, and then...
Oh, come on. Say bye-bye to Mama. Hey, Jimbo. Bye-bye, sweetheart. Okay.
How do you feel? Really, how do you feel when you do get to see him?
If I could explain that, it'd be something else. Like all mothers with their children. And, you know, being separated from him takes a great deal out of me and as well as him. And the foster parents, you know, having to get him ready and getting him ready to go out and then bringing him back in, that doesn't help him at all. That upsets his schedule and mine, as well as upsetting the baby as well. But it upsets me greatly, because once in a while, after seeing him, I'll have to go to psychiatrist to get back where I belong. In the last 3 months, I've noticed a change in him as well as in me. I've become a little more stable than what I was. I've been writing and going to school and doing my schoolwork and everything. I've done everything the county welfare's wanted me to do, and still I keep holding on to it. I don't understand their laws, and I don't understand their regulations.
How many times have you moved in about the year and a half now that we've known each other?
About 18 times.
How do you think that would have been on the baby to have moved that many times?
I don't think it would have been so good. Because it wasn't doing me any good either. I'd get settled in one place and then we'd move. Oof.
When you see the baby each time, does it kind of remind you of what happened in the very beginning and how this all came about?
Yeah. And the brutal beatings and neglect and everything else was piled up on me.
Yeah.
Not that we didn't have any place to stay, it's just that he wouldn't keep a job and support me.
So how long have you been separated now?
Approximately 9.5 months. And it's going to stay permanent this time.
When Dr. Kemp began his intensive work with battered child cases, he realized that pediatricians could do only half the job, treating the children. In virtually every case, the parents needed psychotherapy. At Dr. Kemp's invitation, Dr. Brant Steele, a psychiatrist, joined the battered child team. He has treated dozens of parents, exploring their feelings about themselves and about their children.
Usually have a deep sense of inferiority and uneasiness, unsureness of their own worth and ability. People were often quite uneasy about being seen. First, because they were already under a little bit of suspicion in relation to their activities toward their children and had experienced some degree of accusation. The difference between the parent who abuses his child and the one who doesn't is in some ways very minor, but involves a very important thing. I don't believe any of us who have been parents and are honest about it, but what we have at many times been ready to clobber our children. The thing that keeps us from it is apparently our ability to sympathize or empathize with the small child and have enough love and interest and awareness of the child's difficulties that we think as much of him and his needs as we do of our own. And this helps us hold back some of the aggression and anger that arises in us.
When we found that the baby had bruises and a broken leg and explained to you that we would have to send in a report regarding these injuries, what was your reaction and what was your idea as to what had happened and why this was all going on?
Well,
did you understand the report, first of all, the fact that
no, I didn't.
You had to send in the report?
Well, I knew that you had to send in the report, but I didn't know what was in the report. Fact is, my lawyer, he's been fighting this case for me, but he can't handle it because it's out of his jurisdiction. He's referred to another lawyer in Adams County because I don't have a $3,000 income a year, and he feels that if these child abuse cases can't be proven, you know, unless they're seen by eyewitnesses, and a lot of this was on hearsay evidence when we read the report.
Yeah, it's a little bit different in a dependency hearing. If it were a criminal hearing, if somebody was trying to accuse you criminally of abusing your child, they'd have to have eyewitnesses.
Eyewitnesses to prove.
But in this particular situation, it's a dependency hearing where if the child is not receiving adequate care, and by that they feel that maybe a 4-week-old baby with a broken leg and bruises might not be receiving adequate care. Now, they don't know exactly how it happened.
No, I do.
Well, now,
over many months of conversations like this one with pediatricians, social workers, psychiatrists, and judges, several different versions have emerged of how the child was injured.
And I come home, and I found eating on the baby because the baby had been crying. And instead of finding out if he was hungry or he was wet, he just wouldn't, and he'd start in on it. And I had walked in on this, and about that time I wished I had a gun because I would have shot him. I don't believe in hitting a baby that young anyway, unless it's, you know, mothers play patty cake with their baby anyway. But Jimmy the black and blue mark that he had on his cheek when they took him had come from a baby bottle from his cousin. She rolled over during the night and rolled out of the crib onto his face. And I was staying with my brother and sister-in-law when they took him. And I don't feel if I'm going to be one in a million cases of child abuse, I can name about 6 that are child abuse cases that's in Adams County right now. And I don't feel that they should have the right to step in on one as well as not stepping in the others, you know. They catch me, but they didn't catch these others yet.
The psychiatrist's ultimate goal is to strengthen the parents emotionally so they can manage their own lives adequately and create a healthy home for their children. This is often a very lengthy procedure. Another psychiatrist on the team, Dr. Carl Pollack, explains the psychotherapist's difficult job.
We focus on the parents' needs. We more or less assume that they've struggled with a problem that they've been unable to talk to anyone about, do anything about. We certainly avoid trying to press for details about a beating, for example, and concentrate on helping them open up their own thoughts about what they have been struggling with. You know that the parents have faced a time when they've needed a lot of understanding and a lot of interest from people, and they haven't gotten it.
What, you bump your noggin? Did you bump your noggin? What happened to her? Did you bump your head?
These children are patients in the medical center pediatrics wing. In the pediatrics ward similar to the one next door, Dr. Kemp was aroused to anger and action in 1960 by the presence of several severely abused children. At some point, each member of this Denver team has concurred in a decision to send a battered child back to his home, and later, that child died from abuse. So, for each of these team members, there is the terrible knowledge that if he makes a mistake, the wrong decision, he may be sentencing a child to death. The concept of child battering as a disease emerged slowly, but once it was accepted, other ideas emerged. For instance, the continuing evidence that battering parents, unable to communicate in other ways, were in a sense turning themselves in by bringing their children into the hospital over and over again. In this way, they were asking for help in the treatment of this disease.
And so I asked the nurse what was the problem with this baby, and she said the mother was tired of hearing it cry, so that she couldn't take it any longer, that this baby just irritated her because it cried so much. But at the same time, I noted several bruises on the leg and on the head. So I talked to her for a little while, then I asked the social worker to talk to her. She said, apparently when she talked to the social worker, she made the statement that the baby rolls around and bangs itself into the crib. And she was at one point saying that this baby never moves, that it's a retarded baby and it just isn't developing properly. And then the next breath she was saying that the baby gets the bruises by banging itself on the crib.
I think one thing in here that Dr. Pollack has so often called to our attention is that when the mother keeps saying there's something wrong with the baby and the doctors don't find it, the mother keeps saying it's something wrong with the baby. This is a double message she's giving us. I am in trouble, there's something wrong with me, and I can't manage it. And the fact that the baby's all right is the immediate clue to do something for the mother, not send them home.
Well, we had this case that we recently had of a young mother who brought her child into the emergency room 6 times for diaper rash or bubbling or throwing up. And all this time, this baby was just an absolutely perfect baby. And each time the intern said, what a lovely baby. And each time they said, you know, anxious mother, new mother. But it's very clear that the next time she came in, that all hell had broken loose because the mother tried to kill herself. It turned out that she did abuse the child. The child came in with a broken skull on the 7th emergency room admission. We always think it's a dissatisfied mother who is going to fire us to find some other doctor. But that's not what this is about.
we are unsatisfactory to her because we're not listening really to what she's telling us. We kept disproving her troubles. We said she does not have a diaper rash, she does not lose weight, she's gaining all the time. One time the intern showed her on the scale how well the child had gained, to prove to her that she was wrong about bringing back this child all the time. He didn't realize he was bringing herself back all the time.
We had the case last week where a child was brought in, I think, 4 times in the week, and there actually was small problems with the baby, but the mother kept bringing it back. She'd just gotten it back from a foster home because it was decided that this child was in an unsafe environment, and so she brought the child back 4 times last week, and then she killed herself on Monday.
Once the Battered Child team has determined that a bona fide case of child abuse exists, one of the team members meets with one or both parents to explain the child's physical condition and their legal situation.
I've seen Jody a couple of times since she's been in the hospital, and I'm sorry we haven't had an opportunity to see you earlier. We're quite concerned about Jody, but we do feel that everything that we have found is treatable. In other words, we think she's going to get better. We're vomiting so much, but from all our studies is do a blood clot or some blood that's caught in her intestine, and it's closing off, and it's causing her to vomit. This will go away in a few days. I do have one concern, and I want to be very frank with you about it, and that is, right now, until we can give you some help, I would be very upset or very concerned about sending Jody back home for a while. How do you feel about that?
Well, I think probably I would be more concerned about it than you would.
She also is, you know, a very thin girl. She weighs less than your youngest baby, and she's 4 years old. She has many bruises, and these bruises occurred at different times from what we can tell. She also has some broken bones that have occurred some time ago, but at also different times. She has a bone that's broken in her head, and a couple in her hands, and one in her arm. Do you think it would be difficult for you to leave her in the hospital for a while?
Not if that's what should be done.
Would you find it difficult to, if I would suggest that she might be put in a foster home for a while?
Well, I'm not really worried about her because I think she'll be all right, but if this gets real drawn out and you bring a lot of other people in it, what will they say about my other children?
Well, let me explain what we have to do next, and I think that you have every right to know. The hospital is required by law in this state and in all states to make a report anytime they have a child who has suffered injuries that doctors can't explain.
This is how the mother of a battered child would appear to an investigating doctor or social worker. As Dr. Helfer explained to us, this mother is in real life Mrs. Tony Palmer, a medical technology student at the University of Colorado. She has been trained to play the role of a mother of an abused child. She has essentially been programmed to come up with the answers, feelings, and perceptions of the mothers when they bring their children to the hospital. Mrs. Palmer plays her role to help train medical students, hospital officials, and social workers in the art of interviewing parents who batter their children.
See if he can't help you. Do you have any concerns about talking with a psychiatrist?
Well, my husband won't go for it, and I really need to.
From their interviews with the parents, the doctors saw quickly that they were often extremely immature emotionally, badly in need of the support of another human being. Basically, they needed the mothering they didn't get when they were young. But there is not a Dr. Steele or a Dr. Pollack available to every parent. It became clear that there should be people with an understanding of the problem available at all hours to respond to the needs of the parents, particularly the mothers.
I think we can best describe the type of person who is able to provide the help to the battering child in looking at some of the things they actually do. These interested women, and occasionally men, are readily available to the parents who injure small children. They answer their phone any hour of the day or night. They may make home visits to just sit and chat with these parents. They may do nothing but have coffee with them, listen to them, help them change their baby's diapers, and act as a sounding board. They do not try to get into any deep therapy with these parents. They are backed up by psychiatrists and pediatricians who are trained in the problems of child abuse. And when they do find themselves in a difficult position, they always can receive the help they need. They work a 40-hour week, but they are involved in working with parents almost any time of the day or night. It's not a 9-to-5 situation. This is a difficult position to be put in, and I think that when they are hired to work in this area, we make it very clear to them that we don't expect them to work more than their colleagues, but we do expect them to be available quite frequently.
What are some of the specific things you do with the mothers, parents?
All kinds of things. I've gone to Tupperware parties, primarily because, for example, a gal was giving her first kind of social event, and it was like saying, somebody be there and sort of help me.
The mother was giving this party?
Yes, right, and she would plan it at a time when she knew I was coming, although I wasn't forewarned. And that was, I think she planned it because she wanted someone there who sort of lending her an assist and giving her a hand. Not so much, you know, pouring the coffee, but in terms of being there. Often we'll go either out for coffee or a Coke or something, primarily because I think this is one way of saying, you know, I like you, I want to give to you, and it's a very concrete kind of giving. And I've gotten a lot, frankly. I think once having given, and they have a sense of, you know, what this feels like, they can then get pleasure out of giving back to you.
I would tend probably more to just take them by the hand and guide them through the processes of what they might need, well, say from the hospital. If they have a stomach ache, I can get them to the right place. If they have a toothache, I can find the dentist, and just generally be there to help them find themselves in the direction.
I think this is important because I think very often they have a difficult time finding out where to get what they need. And this goes way, way back. And one is there to help them find, out of all the things in front of them, which is the one that's going to help them, what's going to satisfy them. You know, making appointments, finding a group that's going to be satisfactory to them. They may have known about it, but they couldn't quite make the step until somebody was there to say, good, come on, let's do it.
Most parents need relief and surcease from the problems of infant care. The economically well-off can afford babysitters. They can get people to come in and take care of the children while they go off and do something which is refreshing to their own spirits. But if there is no relief, if the parent gets overwhelmed, almost anything can set him off.
But there was one day that it was early in the spring, and she was going just from one thing to another that day. It was a particularly trying day. I wasn't feeling at all good. And finally it hit a point, and I remember grabbing her. We were in the yard, and I'd been hanging up clothes, and I remember grabbing her, bringing her in, and starting to spank her. And from that point, I don't think I had any control over what I was doing. I knew vaguely what I was doing, but to be able to stop, I had no control over it. And the point where I did stop, and what stopped me at that time, what came through, I don't know, but it was at the point where I had my hands around her neck. And she was screaming. I suppose it probably was the terror in her scream that was the thing that finally came through to me. Even though I knew I was doing this, you know, there was just no control there. And as soon as this came through and I stopped, I cried. I probably cried a half an hour just holding her on my lap. I was extremely upset. And I knew at this point that I couldn't delay it any longer. I had to get help.
Were you thankful at the time?
Well, yes and no. I was very angry at times at the doctor, very angry at the social worker involved, very angry with my husband at times too. But I think through all of it, I knew that this was what I needed. And so even though I would become angry with them and angry with myself and upset in the normal process of getting the help, I think through it all I could still see that there was really a definite need, and I could, you know, after a few months I could begin to see some progress and know that that at least at the time this was keeping me from doing anything worse and would hopefully eventually bring me through it.
Sherry Ulrey has been brought through it.
His wings first. Okay. Okay, Becky.
Ew. Just
Those pretty?
white and
Aren't those pretty?
little polka dots and big long strings look like.
May I see too?
Yes.
Part of the wing.
Yep, that's the wing.
Put his head over there now, too.
Dark head.
This healthy relationship with her husband and children was developed through intensive rehabilitation. In addition, the Ulrey home is now also certified as a foster home for children in the care of the City and County of Denver.
Laid it on the slide so that it would flatten out so you could see it. See all the veins in it?
I can hardly see. It keeps on moving back and forth.
Sure here.
Yeah.
Tim?
Of all the states, Colorado led in developing child abuse legislation. It was one of the first to require that doctors and hospitals report all suspected cases of child battering. Now it is again taking the lead in shifting the emphasis in court proceedings from criminal prosecution of the abusing parent to protective custody of the child.
Well, there are two routes to follow when a child is known to have been abused. One is the one that has always been followed in major criminal abuse, that is a indictment for manslaughter in case of death or murder even, or neglect of a child or insufficient care. And these are all either misdemeanors or major charges. Now, these criminal cases have rarely succeeded. Criminal rules of evidence require that you know who did it, where they did it, why they did it, when they did it, and who saw them do it. These are hardly possible in child abuse situations. Now, the civil route is a very different one. It does not involve any criminal penalties on the parents. It has as its goal only the protection of the child on the one hand, and the protection of the parents from doing harm to themselves, as it were, by harming the child on the other. The civil route, which we call a dependency petition, allows the court to say, we don't know who did it or why they did it, and we don't care. These many injuries in a small baby are evidence by itself, prima facie evidence of insufficient care and protection, and this is enough. The case speaks for itself, which is an accepted legal concept. This is enough to sustain a dependency petition.
One of the people who reflect this new attitude of the courts and interpretation of the law is Roger Allett, Deputy District Attorney in Colorado Springs. At one time, he would have been concerned only with pressing for prosecution and conviction of battering parents.
Your first goal, regardless of how horrible the injuries are that may have occurred, you must protect the child. And after you have taken care of this problem, and you have adequately taken care of the child, and I'm not just immediately, I'm talking about in terms of being sure that you'll be able to get the child out of the home where this sort of thing can't occur again if it's occurred in the home. Then you can move into the actual criminal prosecution area.
The parent has been found guilty in a criminal case of child battering. Do you have any particular feelings on what you think the court's penalty should be?
Well, yes, it depends on the individual case, how severe it is, and so on and so forth. But again, I think you have to, even though it's a criminal case and there's a possibility of a jail sentence, you have to look to protect the children. And if it's perhaps a young mother, you have to realize that you might have her put in jail for 2 years or 3 years, but she's going to get out and have other children. So this may not necessarily be the best answer. The best answer may be to provide the mother with intensive psychiatric care for a period of time, and then continuing psychiatric care and social work. And the child perhaps has to be out of the home. Maybe can never go back to the home. but it's going to depend on the individual case. The statute in Colorado for endangering the health or the life of a child, if this is done willfully, has a sentence of 3 months in the county jail. I might point out that if you endanger the health of a cow or cattle or horses, the sentence is 1 year in the county jail.
Even if the laws are changed, as Dr. Kemp hopes, one difficult problem is likely to remain. Judge Ted Rubin of Denver County Juvenile Court describes the situation.
Unwittingly, battered child reporting laws have resulted in a form of class legislation. Who reports? The public hospitals, the medical centers, the public agencies. Who doesn't report? We believe the private physician fails to report. Now, who goes to the private physician? More often the middle-class family. The private physician doesn't wish to report for fear of prosecution, criminal prosecution. The public family has nowhere to go often but to the public hospital. The public hospital is very sensitized on this issue. They report. The case comes to court, the child goes to a foster home, parent rights might be terminated. The private family influenced also in that there are fewer, we believe fewer battered child cases because they have some of the amenities in life. They can hire a babysitter and get away. They can go off to the seashore, go to the mountains, have fewer tensions. They have enough tensions, but they have relief from tensions which broken down poor families fail to have.
You're much better off rich than poor for many other reasons. It's like Sophie Tucker said, I've been poor and I've been rich. Rich is better. What's needed here is a very aggressive reaching out on the part of society toward lonesome women who have small children who simply have no one to talk to. These are the most isolated people we know. They don't use the telephone. They hide their houses. They keep the screens closed. And they think, in fact, no one would worry about them or would care about them. This, I think, is a very obvious lesson that anybody could do something about. And this, of course, means a very aggressive going out, reaching out to these people. Much more important than treating a child who has suffered serious injury is to try to mobilize society's concern for the minor child and saying that every child is all of our business, that we cannot say the child belongs to the parents, they can do with it anything they want to. We're now saying the child is in fact everybody's business and that society must intervene and be a nosy partner. This is a new concept.
If it's possible to speak of a situation like this in relative terms, the battered children of Denver are lucky in their own way because they have trained and knowledgeable people ready to help them. But even in Denver, the work has just begun. There and elsewhere, the tragedy continues. To many, it may seem that the logical solution to the problem of battered children is to take the child away from his parents forever and put him in a safe foster home, and then forget about the people who hurt him or lock them up. But experience has shown this is no answer. The parents will be released from jail someday. They may have other children, and the whole tragic cycle may begin again. The Denver Battered Child team has shown what can be done to break the cycle, providing that hospitals, courts, welfare systems, and police are willing to work together, and providing there is money for a trained staff. There are a few small projects like this in other cities, but they are the exception. In most parts of this country, the procedure is simple. If it's a really bad case, lock the parents up and put the child in a foster home. If it's not so bad, well, let the family struggle on together until it gets worse. To break the cycle of abused child growing into abusing parent would take great public commitment. And we are often a very selfish people. If the garbage isn't picked up in our neighborhood, we demand and get action because that affects us directly. But who will go to bat for the wounded child and his desperate parents? Neither of them, battered child nor battering parent, can affect social change. But you can. You can influence your legislature and your welfare departments to develop projects like the one in Denver. If you are a physician, you can report suspected abuse cases, as your state law requires. And all of us can remember, as Dr. Kemp said, that every child is everybody's business. Every child is all of ours.
The Battered Child was produced at WTTW, Chicago.
This is NET, the Public Television Network.